I've now watched Book of Boba Fett Episode 5 twice, and I'm probably going to watch it a third, maybe even a fourth take of this video that if you're watching it, you've already seen it. So spoilers do lie ahead. Yes, where I have been so incredibly excited, so completely confused, and so perfectly pissed off all at the same time. I'm going to share some theories today about how this happened, so stick around. Let's get into it. Well, good morning, folks. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. Good to see everybody out there, as always. And of course, if you are like one of the 60 or 70% of folks that are watching this video that have not yet subscribed, please take a moment. It's a big help here on YouTube to do the following things. Please hit that like button on this video. Please hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell. Share this sucker out on the social medias. And do, as always, leave a comment with your thoughts on this episode of the Book of Boba Fett before you head out today, or on the video if you think I'm crazy or you think it's great. I don't care. So, welcome aboard, everybody. It's good to see you. Fine folks back here again. Let's talk about this, because there is a lot to talk about, and I usually do not do episodic reviews like this on Valiant Renegade, but, you know, this is one of those shows. Star Wars is one of those passions that every now and again I'm going to dive into it if I think that I really want to talk about. If it's something I'm excited from Force of Light Entertainment, had a good discussion, and unfortunately, that time that Michelle and I spent together was spent lamenting how slow and boring this series has been to this point. Well, Episode 5 turned all that on a dime. I want to start with this article from Variety Magazine that was written last night. And I want to cut, I think, happened because, needless to say, Episode 5 was such in stark contrast to every other episode we've gotten so far. Not just because it didn't feature Boba Fett himself, the titular character, for even one frame of a 45-minute episode. The entire episode was about Mando. Din Djarin makes a triumphant return, and boy, was it triumphant. I mean, this story had the pacing, it had the excitement, it had the hook, it had everything that fans have been waiting very patiently for through 4 very long, just in my opinion. But from what I'm seeing out there online and in social medias and in magazine articles, even like this from Variety, see, the Book of Boba Fett, this is Variety Magazine, how Episode 5 expands the Star Wars universe and resets fan expectations. Yes, it did. And of course, they give us a little spoiler warning at the beginning. Throughout the first season of the Book of Boba Fett, it always felt like a matter of time before Pedro Pascal's Mando from The Mandalorian sauntered back into the story. Boba Fett, of course, is a spin-off of The Mandalorian. Temuera Morrison and Ming-Na Wen have fought alongside Mando. Boba Fett was even famously announced in a post-credits teaser at the end of Mando Season 2 finale. Still, it's surprising that Mando didn't so much join the Book of Boba Fett as take over the show entirely, at least for one episode. Boba Fett is nowhere to be seen, and Fennec only shows up in the final minutes. I'd say she really shows up in the final 30 seconds. Instead, the aptly titled Return of Mandalorian is effectively he parted ways with Grogu. Mando rejoins the remnants of the Mando covert from the planet Navarro, the Children of the Watch, only to be cast out upon his confession that he had removed his helmet, so on and so forth. If anything, and this is key, the language in this article is key. And again, this is Variety Magazine, right? This is one of the 3 of the Holy Trinity of Hollywood publications. So this is not a small-time publication saying this. This is something that people like Jon Favreau, like Dave Filoni, like the people at Disney, they read this stuff, right? They will see this. If anything, quote, "The Return of Mandalorian, crisply written by creator and executive producer Jon Favreau and sharply directed by Star Wars regular Bryce Dallas Howard," who, if you've watched me on this channel, we've talked about the episodes of Mando and things like that Bryce has done in the past. She's phenomenal. I love her work. She definitely has, you know, that lineage of her father, the great Ron Howard, that passed down that talent to her. There is no doubt in my mind. And more work. So if you're listening out there, John, get this woman some more work. But listen to the language. Crisply written and sharply directed. These are adjectives that would never have been and have never to this point been used to describe anything in the first 4 episodes. They have been tedious and slow, like we said. It's like two completely different shows we're looking at right now. And again, I have a theory of what happened with that and why it's such in stark contrast. It reinforces, and this is back to the article, it reinforces the pervasive feeling spare interlude within a much, much larger saga. Ouch. After 4 often lackadaisical episodes, they're just piling it on. Focusing entirely on Boba Fett's exploits on Tatooine, this week's episode broadens the scope of the show well beyond the title character's ambitions. Yes, Fennec recruits Mando to help with Boba Fett's power struggle with the Pike Syndicate, but this episode makes plain just how small that struggle feels within the grand story at play here. Exactly. The scale of this episode has outdone by orders of magnitude anything that we have gone through so far in the Book of Boba Fett. It really does take these 4 just long of story that we should have gotten up to this point, not just now in the 3rd to last episode of the season or potentially the entire show, because I don't know if this is going to go to a season 2. I don't think the intention ever was. And this is what's so baffling to me. And it's not that it featured Din Djarin over Boba Fett. Everybody, including myself, was really excited to see Boba Fett, right? We all wanted to see what Temuera Morrison was going to do with this character. Well, as it turned out, it's not much. And it's not Temuera's fault. It's not Ming-Na Wen's fault. It's really never the actor's fault in cases like this, because at the end of the day, this is a writing issue. This is a show running and directing issue. And it's baffling to me, again, that we could have Jon Favreau's name plastered across the credits as the writer of the episodes that we've gotten up to this point, even though we know there's more people in the writer's room than just Jon. But for those 4 first episodes to look like that, and then we watch what we watched yesterday with episode 5, and you could obviously tell that was a Favreau episode. That was a Jon Favreau show. That type of storytelling, the pacing, it moved. Think about how much information was conveyed in that single 45-minute episode. Think of how much, not just the Book of Boba Fett or Mando's story, but think of the broad scope of the current story of Star Wars lineage that's being produced right now by Disney. Think of how much more forward that story has moved. We got Mando getting a new ship. We got Mando learning more about the Darksaber. We got Mando's first big challenge to keep the Darksaber. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And for 7 minutes, they spent fixing up the old starfighter from Naboo, a callback to the Phantom Menace era of Star Wars. Look, I'm a fixing up cars guy. I love watching car restoration shows. So I got to say, selfishly, I really enjoy those 5 or 7 minutes. And I know Amy Sedaris isn't everybody's cup of tea. I can take her in small bites with that character because it does get a little goofy. But then again, I think there was just the right amount. It wasn't, I think if we'd gone any more with her, it would have gotten a little bit more, irritating. But I was okay with it. Like I said, the rest of the episode was so good that I didn't mind kind of little niggling issues like that. That's small potatoes for me. The rest of it was fantastic. But again, when you look at this article, when you look at the way Variety is even describing this show and how much different episode 5 was, you have to start wondering how. Well, stop and think about a few things. We know in the past how tight-lipped Jon Favreau has been with all of these shows over there. Things just do not get out of that production. People do not leak things, and they do it by compartmentalizing so much of the production from one scene to the next, from one episode to the next. Remember, actors usually only get a couple of pages of script at a time. Too much information comes out at once. It reduces the propensity for that information to be leaked. Well, let's take that to the nth degree, and let's really think about episode 5 for a minute. Episode 5 was in a vacuum. That episode was shot completely apart from the rest of the story that we've gotten so far through 4 episodes of things like cute and cuddly Rancors and Power Ranger Voltron Vespas. I don't I don't even want to think about that again. But here's the thing. This episode could have been plugged in at any point in this series. This episode could have stood completely on its own, could have been a one-off. In this episode really had much of any effect on the Book of Boba Fett show itself, except for Fennec Shand showing up in the last 30 seconds to ask Mando to come help Boba, which of course Mando agrees right off the bat, doesn't even want payment for obvious reasons. Boba Fett obviously all coming into play, and Mando is now going to help out. So I can only hope, obviously, that the next 2 episodes will feature Din Djarin routinely throughout the next 2 episodes, and that the pacing will match what we got in episode 5, finally. Because quite frankly, I will probably never watch the first 4 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett ever again. The show has no rewatchability up until the point of what I saw yesterday. But again, getting back to yesterday, here's what I think happened. I think this episode was shot completely apart and away from the rest of the production on the Book of Boba Fett. There's no way that this was done everything. And I say that a little tongue-in-cheek. Obviously, there's a lot of the same crew members here working on the show, a lot of the same folks. But in terms of the writing, in terms of just the way the show looked, the way it felt, the production value was tremendously higher than anything we've seen so far. I mean, the Book of Boba Fett is one of these $100 million budgeted television shows for Disney+. And it looks like they spent $70 million of that on this one episode. I mean, I know they've got more to go, and I'm being a little facetious with that number. But the bottom line is, this just looked and felt like nothing else. It looked like a totally different show, and it just boggles my mind. So I don't know. Continues to go through some of the details of the show and talk about, what some of the more detailed spoilers. I don't necessarily need to get into this. But the bottom line is 35 and 40-minute back-to-tank flashbacks, which drag this show under the waves. That has been my biggest complaint. It's all the stuff with the Sand People could have been accomplished in the first episode right off the bat. Maybe 20 minutes is all you needed to do that. Not over the course of 4 episodes, an hour and a half or whatever it's been. 20 minutes max. And then you cut to 5 years. The show should have been paced much better. I think about even the chase scene in episode 4, where the Vespas and the scooters are running around town chasing the speeder. Even that looked slow and mundane. Think about the speed and the movement and just how that Naboo fighter, and I realize it's so much better. Think about the opening scene. Din Djarin walks in and just kicks everyone's butt in the room, cuts a guy in half with a darksaber, puts it. I don't understand this. And it should not take Din Djarin and the Mandalorian to get this kind of pacing in a show called The Book of Boba Fett. So come on, guys. But I think Favreau did this episode in complete secrecy. I don't think Temuera Morrison and Ming-Na Wen had any idea, along with a lot of... I think back to when I first heard about the Book of Boba Fett, and they're talking about the Book of Boba Fett being maybe a 6-episode limited series. I think the same is supposed to be holding true for Obi-Wan, a 6-episode limited series. And then it drops, and we're being told there's 7 episodes. Oh, they squeezed an extra in and basically just empty stuff shoved into episodes to make them a little bit longer to squeeze out 1 extra episode. Well, now it also seems that maybe they didn't even quite have 6 episodes to begin with, and this episode was brought in as a standalone. Yeah, it looks like a teaser for Mando Season 3, but good Lord, it sticks out like a sore thumb in this series so far, and it is maddening. It is absolutely frustrating that we have 2 completely different shows combined into one at this point. I pray that episodes 6 and 7, the 2 final episodes of the Book of Boba Fett, again, will have the level of care, attention to detail, and most importantly, quality of writing and pacing in the story. Keep moving the story forward. I don't want to see any more long, dead, boring spots like we've been getting through 4 episodes, or ridiculous things like Rainbow Bright bicycles running through the streets of Mos Espa. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Do share this out on the social medias, and of course, please drop a comment before you head out today. That's the most important thing. YouTube loves all that stuff, but especially comments. I want to know, what did you guys think of the return of Din Djarin in Episode 5 of the Book of Boba Fett? And until next time, as always, take care.